We've all heard it. The path to a good job is a 4-year degree. Well, let's be real. That path is getting more and more expensive. So people are starting to ask, what if there's a shortcut, a faster, maybe even cheaper way to a really solid paycheck? Well, that's where these short-term credentials come in. They sound great, right? But the big question is, do they actually deliver? Let's dig in and see.
So yeah, this is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? Can one of these shorter, super focused programs really set you up for success in the same way a big university degree can? It'd be great if the answer was a simple yes, but it's not. It's complicated. So we're going to look at the numbers and figure out when these credentials are a golden ticket and when they might be a gamble.
Okay, first things first. Let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing. When I say short-term credential, what does that even mean? Well, it's a huge umbrella. It could be anything from a certificate in welding to an associate's degree in nursing. The main idea, the thing they all have in common, is that you can usually finish them in a year or two, sometimes even less. The whole point is to get you skilled up and out into the workforce, fast.
And look, the payoff can be absolutely massive. Check this out. One study in Ohio looked at community college grads and found that women who got an associate's degree earned almost $1,800 more per quarter. Per quarter! That's nearly $7,000 a year. For a lot of people, that is life-changing money. But, and this is a really, really big but, not all of these credentials are the same, not even close.
This is where it gets tricky, right? You hear these success stories, but you also know there's a risk. Getting that higher paycheck usually means taking on some student debt. So how do you know if it's worth it? It all comes down to a little something called return on investment.
And the Urban Institute put it perfectly. It's not just about how much more money you can make. The real question is that extra cash enough to cover the debt you had to take on to get the credential in the first place? It's that simple. Did your investment pay off?
So how do we actually measure that? Well, there's a really key metric for this, and it's called the debt burden. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's just a simple comparison. How much debt you have versus how much you're earning each year. This one number tells you pretty much everything you need to know about whether you made a good bet. And obviously, the lower that number is, the better off you are.
And wow, just look at this chart. It shows you how wildly different that debt burden can be depending on what you study. Over on the right, you've got repair programs. Their debt burden is super low. Graduates there can pay off their loans no problem. But then, look all the way to the left. Personal and culinary services. This is where you can get into trouble. You might think, oh, the debt isn't that high. But because the earnings are also lower, your debt burden is actually huge. It's a much, much riskier financial move.
Seeing that huge difference on the last slide just begs the question, why? What's causing these massive swings in outcomes? Is it all about what you decide to study? Or is it about where you go to school? Let's find out.
So you've got these two big variables in the equation. On one side, you have what you study, the actual field, the specific certificate. And on the other side, you have where you study, which school you pick, and what the job market is like in that city. So what's more important for your financial future? What or where?
And get this, the answer is pretty shocking. The research found that for 5 out of the 6 major fields they looked at, where you study actually matters more than what you study. Think about that. The school you choose and the local economy have a bigger impact on your debt burden than the actual program you're in. The only real exception was health sciences, where the specific license you get is king. But for almost everybody else, where trumps what. That's a game changer. So when we say where, what are we really talking about? Well, it boils down to a few key things. First, the type of school. Public schools tend to have better results than for-profit ones. Second, how much that school actually spends on teaching you things. And third, and this one is so important, the local job market. It's common sense, right? Having an amazing credential in a town with 0 jobs for that skill, well, it's not going to do you much good.
Okay, moving on. Knowing all this is great if you're a student trying to make a choice, but it also gives us clues about how to make the whole system better for everyone. And a big part of that puzzle is policy, especially when it comes to financial aid.
And the proof is right here. There was this big experiment where they offered federal Pell Grants, financial aid, to students in these short-term programs. And the results were amazing. Enrollment shot up by almost 15%, and the number of students who actually finished their program jumped by more than 9%. The takeaway is pretty clear. When you help students pay for school, more of them sign up and more of them graduate. It works.
But it's not quite that simple. Financial aid helps for sure, but it's not a magic wand. Look at this. Even with those Pell Grants, a whole lot of students still had to take out loans. And we're not talking small amounts either. In some cases, the average loan was almost $13,000. So that's the question, right? If they're getting free money from a grant, why on earth are they still going so deep into debt?
Well, here's your answer, and it's all about the math. The average grant these students got was about $1,800, but the average total cost to just be a student, we're talking tuition, housing, food, getting around, was nearly $17,000. That is a massive gap, and that gap is exactly why so many people still need loans even when they're getting help.
All right, final section. So we've seen it's complicated. There's a lot to think about. So how do you, as a student or someone thinking about going back to school, actually make a smart choice? Let's boil it all down into a practical game plan.
It really comes down to 3 key steps. First, do your research. Talk to career counselors, look online, and figure out which jobs are actually in demand where you live. Don't just pick something that sounds interesting. Step 2, investigate the institution. Seriously, dig into the data. Compare the public schools to the for-profits. See what their graduates actually earn and how much debt they have. And third, and we've hit this a few times, think local. A credential is only as valuable as the jobs available in your town or city.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it seems like the line between going to school and having a job is getting blurrier all the time. And that makes me wonder, as we move forward, is the most important part of education not what you learn, but how well you research your options beforehand? Is making a smart educational investment becoming a critical skill in itself? Maybe the most important one you can have.